May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Here am I. Send me. Please be seated. In today's gospel, we hear the beginning of what starts to be an engagement with a group that will eventually become the disciples, but primarily they are fishermen on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, not far from the village of Capernaum. We have heard over the last few Sundays that Jesus has been busy showing up in synagogues, reading from the prophet Isaiah, and teaching. There have been a few miracles, just a few along the way, water into wine, a few healings, but primarily the action of Jesus at this point in his ministry is to quote the good news, the promising news for all of God's children that is found in Isaiah. And the crowds, well, the crowds listened to him with amazement and wonder. Here was a stranger to many, to few, a local man, with a keen learning and a gift for explaining the words of God's promises to God's people. And they wanted more. And so Jesus goes on his way, teaching the crowds that are beginning to grow in size. And so as he went on his way teaching, we find him today on the shore by Gennesaret, which is not far from Capernaum. The crowd is large, larger than the previous gathering, and Jesus is looking for a way to make the Galilean shore a better venue. On the shore, he sees Simon and other fishermen who are cleaning out their boats after a night of fishing on the sea. The boats are turned over, the nets have been cleaned and set out to dry for the next night's coming catch. And Jesus sees a solution to his amplification venue problem. In the gospel, it appears that Simon, who will soon be known to us as Peter, readily allows Jesus on board and sets out just a bit from the shore so that Jesus can begin to teach. But one of the things that I love the best about Simon Peter, one of the things that really endears him to my heart, is that he is so every one of us. He has to be tired. They have been up all night, pulling in a less than satisfactory catch of fish. He has cleaned the boat, he has tidied, cleaned, and folded the nets. He's turned the boat over. Finally, he is able to go home, and here comes this stranger with a crowd in tow wanting to climb into his nice, clean boat and teach. You want to do what? Why? Oh, fine. Come in. And they set off just that bit from the shore. Now, Simon's not alone. We know that he has partners. He has James and John, who are sons of Zebedee, and they too pause and listen to Jesus teach. So Jesus' lesson ends, and Simon could very well be thinking, the boat isn't really too much worse for wear. It's still pretty clean, and the nets weren't disturbed, and all I need to do is get him back onto shore, bid him goodbye, turn the boat over, and go home. And then comes the pivotal moment, the moment that will lead Simon to take on the name Peter, the moment that will change everything for Peter, James, and John, and 9 other folk, and by us, and by extension, us as well. Jesus turns to Simon, James, and John and suggests that they take the boats back out. The just cleaned up boats with the folded up clean nets go back out and put them on the other side of the boat into the deep water. Now, I don't know a lot about fishing, but I know that it's better to fish sometimes at night or just at daylight or at dusk because the fish come to the top of the water then. During the heat of the day and in the sun, they're no fools. They go down deep where they can't be caught. That's where the fish are, on the other side of the boat, but down deep where they can't be caught. Simon does protest. We've been all out all night, and still, reluctantly, they put their nets down into the deep water. The pivotal moment. For this is where, for the first time, that Jesus explains to that group of fishermen, soon to be disciples, and here and now to us as well, just what our call as Christians is all about. I like to quote poetry from the Methodist pastor Stephen Garnes Holmes, well, more than just a little. His poetry comes into my inbox every morning, Monday through Friday, and usually contains poems from all 4 passages of the lectionary for the week. Not this week. This pivotal moment is of such great consequence that every single poem that he wrote, all 5 of them, were on not only this gospel, but this particular part of this gospel. Because even though it is during the daylight when fish normally swim deeper in the water and avoid the nets, even though the catch had been meager and there was absolutely no reason to think it was going to be any better now in the daylight, they put their nets down and filled them with so many fish they were afraid the nets would break. The abundance of fish is carried into the boats, and Simon falls at Jesus' feet, declaring that he is a sinful man and not worthy. Garnes Holmes writes, "You are worthy. The miracle beneath the surface is not yours to hide. Open yourself and be astounded. Then get up off your knees and come. The world needs your light." For this is not a lesson about the belief of Simon Peter or the rest of us, for that matter. This is not a lesson in falling on our knees in distress and asking for forgiveness because we listen to the ordinary and not to the extraordinary. This is a lesson in realizing that in listening to Jesus teach about the promise of love and hope and abundance that God gives is a message for all of God's children. In a different offering, Garnes Holmes says, "What might it mean for you to let down your net in these deep waters? To listen deeply to someone for what they are saying or not saying beneath the surface. To seek, even in your most disappointing failure, the blessing that lurks beneath. To seek in someone hard to love, the divine child, wounded, hidden. To let the net of your heart down into the vast depths of humanity and take it all in with tender compassion. To love this world and let your heart down into its darkness, trusting the grace of the beloved schools there." This is not a lesson in how great the crowds were that followed Jesus. This is not a lesson in being tired and hesitant to follow where the Spirit calls us, and therefore reluctant to follow Jesus. And this most definitely is not a lesson about doubting and then begging for forgiveness by stating that we are not worthy of the promise of the message that Jesus brings forth. This is a lesson in the revelation of a small and ragged group of fishermen that the promise of God's abundant love is meant for each and every one of God's children. That God's children are often in the unexpected places, and that God's children are there for us to go out beyond these doors and find. Sometimes in hidden places, sometimes in the deep, sometimes in the dark. We are the light that is able to find them, to bring to them the promise of that abundant love. We are the ones joined with Christ through our baptisms in bringing God's love to the world. Being fishers of people is not about filling the pews to the point of breaking. One of my favorite quotes from Stephanie Spellers, and there are a lot of quotes of Stephanie Spellers that I like, she states that Jesus never said, "Come worship me." Never, not once. What he did say, and said repeatedly, was, "Come follow me." And Episcopal liturgist Lewis Wilde tells us that if we as a faith community live out our call as baptized Christians to seek and serve Christ in all persons, that the Holy Spirit will draw the people to us that we need to accomplish our mission. Garnes Holmes puts it this way: to be fishers of people is to let the great net of your love down into their lives, trusting that there you will discover miracles and blessings and draw them out. Amen.